Yellowstone demonstrates that it can function effectively without John Dutton at the helm as it moves forward with its last set of episodes after Kevin Costner's abrupt departure, albeit the actor is still given credit in the opening credits. In the apocalypse of change, Taylor Sheridan establishes new plot lines, new concepts, and a new framework that will lead us to that unavoidable series finale, reinforcing the new status quo in the neo-Western. What took place on Yellowstone this week? Much of it is paving the way for a huge conflict that we can only anticipate. Yellowstone immediately transports us to the 6 weeks earlier past, which encompasses the time between Season 5 Part 1 and the premature passing of John Dutton. When we return to Texas and join Rip Kohlhauser and the group on the 4-6's 6,666 ranch, we find rattlesnakes in Teeter's Jennifer Landon tent. In fact, one of them is lying directly on Teeter's chest. When the team moves their camp to a snake-free stretch of land, Beth Kelly Riley surprises everyone by stealing her husband and promising that the cowboy's significant others will be flown down on the company's pay once she's finished with Rip. When Ryan Ian Bohan is struggling after a breakup, Rip gives him the position of wagon boss, so there is at least some benefit to being by himself. However, Beth begins to acquire some fresh ideas down in Texas. Rip can see his wife's wheels turning after learning from an old-timer at the bar, Dwayne Tarver, that Texas is the cattle capital of the world. And a Texas state trooper, Karina Log, that the people in the Lone Star State passionately admire their cowboys. Since there have already been speculations about a possible Beth-Rip spin-off, the word spilling is crucial in this situation. Here, Rip mentions that this is the first time he has ever left Montana, which seems odd given that the nearby Yellowstone National Park and even the train station are mostly in Wyoming, but we'll overlook it. Beth seems to want to change this. Just think of what we could accomplish if we weren't bound to that ranch, she continues. Rip responds, I decided to be chained to that ranch. In Montana, Tate Brecken Merrill, Monica Kelsey as Bill, and Kayce Luke Grimes labor to make their new home a home. After some obvious improvements, Monica thanks them. According to what we know, this is the first house they have owned without renting or sharing with either of their families. Even though it still sits on historic Dutton land, it is entirely theirs. This family deserves the victory because of everything they have been through, particularly in the first half of Season 5. Unfortunately, all of that is tragically cut short by John Dutton's passing. Even though the past is peaceful and quiet, Yellowstone cannot remain there indefinitely. After John Dutton's passing, the latter part of the apocalypse of change jumps back to the present. Here, Rip discusses the next course of action with Lloyd Bridger Forey J. Smith, who is now back at the Dutton Ranch. Lloyd says, Rip, I don't believe that bullshit in the newspapers, both of them realizing that John Dutton wasn't the kind of man who committed suicide. The old cowboy points out that Lloyd has spent his entire life at the Yellowstone, but Rip suggests that he should look for other employment. Me too, says Rip. Rip then visits Carter Finn Little, who hasn't been able to handle the news of John's passing. Rip encourages the child to return to his work and cowboy up by telling him, don't believe what you read in the news. Nobody quit you. He does just that, because he want to be like John Dutton. Beth finds Summer Higgins Piper Parabo remaining on the ranch, contemplating her future, when she comes downstairs. While Summer clarifies that she is still under house arrest, Beth discloses that there were no such requirements for her release. Actually, John didn't give her the choice to go because he just wanted her to stay at the ranch with him. However, Beth wants Summer to leave now that her father is no longer there, so she tells her to leave Dodge. Summer makes an effort to speak with Beth directly, but the Dutton Harris appears uninterested. Rather, she drives away after dropping her off in the bunkhouse. Rip ultimately drives her to the airport. When Summer tries to convey that their way of life is dying, Rip explains that John Deere started creating tractors instead of steel plows when the automobile arrived. They rolled with the changes, says Rip. I guess we're just going to have to do the same too. Summer most likely departs Montana permanently after that. The scene in which Jamie West Bentley returns to his Attorney General's office at the Montana State Capitol in Helena is arguably the most dramatic in this episode. His sister is waiting for him there, smoking a cigarette at his desk. In an attempt to force Jamie to look her in the eye, Beth slaps her adoptive brother in the face 3 times when she confronts him. He can't, however. Even though he wasn't directly at fault, knowing the truth about his father's murder has caused Jamie and Beth to grow even more estranged from one another. When Beth says, "Okay, next time is the last time. Your final act of life will be seeing me." Jamie, I swear to God. Beth leaves her brother's workplace prepared to arrange his demise, promising that her smiling face will be the last thing he sees, however. She also departs in time to encounter Sarah Atwood, Dawn Olivieri, and Ella Steele, John Emmett Tracy, lackeys for market equities, which results in Beth severely abusing Sarah. Beth, distraught, phones Kayce and informs him of what appears to be verified for her. He was the one. She explains he didn't even deny it, Kayce. He refused to meet my gaze. To put it another way, he was unable to. As it happens, Kayce too finds this to be the last straw. Earlier in the Apocalypse of Change, Monica welcomes Kayce back to his homestead. Kayce spends some much-needed time to discuss with his son and decides to stay at the Dutton Ranch house with him until he and Beth can finish all the paperwork. Tate and Kayce rarely share a scene on Yellowstone, so this was a pleasant diversion. Here, he poses a subject he had never considered before: what does his son want to be when he grows up? When Kayce tells him, "I've never had a job that made me feel whole. Your mother alone does that. As well as you." Tate says he would like to work at the Dutton Ranch and as a fly fishing guide. For the sake of their family's history, Kayce is prompted to think again about taking it over, but only if Tate is truly interested in doing so. When Tate finally says, "I just don't understand why he finds it difficult to accept his grandfather's passing. He can recall either John Dutton's life or death," Kayce assures him, "But your heart can't focus on both." Instead of being angry with his grandfather, Tate decides to miss him. "Yeah, me too," Buddy acknowledges his father. Leaping ahead a bit, Kayce receives his call from Beth after he, Monica, and Tate are on the road. Kayce immediately calls up newcomer Cade McPherson, Jake McLaughlin, an old comrade from his time as a Navy SEAL. The Dutton heir pulls over to install the app when Cade sends Kayce a link to one that allows them to chat off the books. Monica stops her own vehicle, approaches Kayce's window, and inquires about his well-being. She doesn't trust him when he tells her that he is. When she gets back to her car, she tells Tate that they will have to battle to keep their family together, telling her kid, "We can't let this take him from us." Cade promises Kayce that he will begin investigating everyone who may have been involved in John's death once they are back in Kayce's truck. The final 4 episodes of the Apocalypse of Change are introduced. Beth plots retaliation against her brother, Rip drops Summer off at the airport and muses on how his future might alter. Jamie and Sarah cement their purported triumph over John Dutton in his office, and Kayce goes off the books to discover who killed his father. As Teeter, Jake Ream, and Walker Ryan Bingham start a new day of working the land and tending to the Duttons' cattle, we see Ryan gathering them up in the episode's last scene. Although Gil Birmingham wasn't present in this episode, the story isn't quite ended yet, but change is undoubtedly happening. We are aware that Yellowstone's conclusion has been long overdue. The legacy of John Dutton's family will endure, either in Texas or Montana, or possibly both.